Well, as I said, we're in the second week of looking at our character study, and last week we started probably with a person we might not normally have started with Cain, and looking at his anger and how we can apply it to our lives and fight our sin struggle together. This week, if you've off the top of your head know who Shiphrah and Puah are, I'm very impressed with you, but we're going to look at them and what we can learn from them. So their story comes to us in Exodus chapter 1, verses 15 through 22. We're moving forward an entire book in the Torah and in the Jewish scriptures, so we're going to read that this morning. If you pick up a Bible on your table, you can turn just to the second book of the Bible. Very easy to find in the first chapter. You can also see the scripture behind me, or there's a link at the bottom of your bulletin that you can put into your smartphone. So here is Exodus 1, 15 through 22. Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this? And let the male children live. The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and they give birth before the midwife comes to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. This is the word of the Lord. Well, this weekend, Monday, HBO's incredible docudrama on the Chernobyl nuclear disaster by that same title, Chernobyl. That disaster, if you're younger like me and can't remember it, took place in 1986. Those of you who are older, of course, would remember what that was like and what the news was globally. But the 5 episodes that portrayed this disaster had some of the best acting, the best drama, and the best storytelling at the highest level. And I'm hoping it wins a bunch of Emmys later on in September. I could not more highly recommend it as a television show. It's not light watching, let me just say that. It is not easy to watch, but it is incredible. And what's amazing about it, of course, is it is true. Thousands of lives were lost in the Chernobyl disaster, and millions perhaps were exposed to radiation all across Eastern Europe and parts of what is the former Soviet Union. And it is true, had it not been for the work of hundreds of thousands of men and women who risked their lives, who put themselves in tons of radiation, probably shortening their lives or ensuring that they would get cancer years down the road, millions of lives could literally have been lost if not for the efforts of thousands who countered the disaster and the ramifications. Most of the credit is due, or much of it anyway, is due to one scientist named Valery Legasov. You can see the real Valery Legasov right there in the upper right there. Below him is an image of the 3 men ultimately held responsible for the disaster in the Soviet Union. They are on trial in that picture for their crimes, and they did the trial still kind of in denial about what was going on. They did the trial back in Chernobyl, which itself was still exposed to radiation. But if you know anything about Soviet trials in the 1980s, then you know they are mostly show trials. They are not a place where actual justice tended to be carried out, and so their fate was already secured by the time they were on trial. Legasov is called to testify against them as a result of his investigation and many other scientists about what happened on the night of the nuclear reactor explosion. They were negligent, and they did make terrible decisions leading up to the blast. They were surely guilty. However, Legasov knew something else. One key flaw these men had actually been ignorant of had been known by other scientists in the Soviet Union. Indeed, other nuclear scientists had published on this flaw that affected the Chernobyl reactor which exploded, but the Kremlin, the KGB, Soviet intelligence redacted that flaw from a report because they feared it would embarrass the Soviet Union if it got out into the world that there was a major flaw in Soviet nuclear reactors. Thus, it was not just these men who were responsible for the disaster, but the failure of the entire Soviet state. But for Legasov to stand up and say at a Soviet show trial that the Soviet Union was responsible meant one thing, meant the end of his life. To criticize the Soviet state in the former Soviet Union was literally risking your life. He was a father and a husband. It was risking his family. It was risking his entire job and livelihood. You could be shot. You could be imprisoned for life. But Legasov had a choice to make. Tell the truth, do what's right, make it known so that these three men and the whole Soviet state are responsible. And thus you would end up helping other Soviet scientists to correct the 16 other nuclear reactors which still had this flaw and could thus have a disaster just like Chernobyl, or cover it up and protect his life. Lie for the sake of the state and thus put the lives of millions again at risk, but saving his own. The image on the left up there is HBO's dramatic reenaction of Legasov's decision at the trial, played by actor Jared Harris. Legasov, at the risk of his own life and his own family, decided to do what was right. He told the truth about the three men and their full culpability for what they did, and also for the Soviet state's failure and cover-up, which led to the disaster. He was ended up not being killed, not being imprisoned, primarily because he'd become so famous around the world that it would have been an embarrassment for the state to have done so. But he did lose his prestigious job, which he held previously, and lost essentially all his livelihood. A little more than a year later, after that, he took his own life, 2 years to the day of the Chernobyl disaster. But after his death, he released some audio notes and other notes that he had. The flaw of the other reactors was made known, and other scientists, Russian Soviet scientists, were able to correct the flaw in the other nuclear plants so that a disaster like Chernobyl did not happen again. The cost of doing what was right for Legasov was great, but he was guided by something greater than himself, greater than his own well-being. In today's scripture, two women, at great potential cost to themselves, stand up to power and do what is right, because they're guided by a greater purpose than their own self-interest, than their own self-preservation. There's something they fear more than the state that is before them. So here's our key takeaway today to learn from Shiphrah and Puah. Shiphrah and Puah, the Hebrew midwives, teach us that fearing God and doing what is right in his kingdom now supersedes all other tribal allegiances. Shiphrah and Puah teach us that fearing God and doing what is right in his kingdom now supersedes all other tribal allegiances. Let's understand what's going on as we enter the book of Exodus. We're going to be doing this a lot during the series since we're kind of jumping around different places in Scripture, so we always kind of have to get the context of what is going on. Of course, this happens well after creation has come and what we saw last week in Genesis 1 through 3, and then what happened with Cain and Abel after that. The spiral of sin and what happens with Cain and Abel continues all the way played out through chapters 1 through 11 of Genesis, and it just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse until Genesis chapter 12, something changes. What changes is that God chooses one man to set his kindness and love on, and promises through that one man he will make a great nation. And indeed, all the nations, all the peoples of the world, one day will be blessed through this one man and through his one family and the nation that will come from him. This one man is, of course, Abraham, and this was the start in Genesis 12 of the nation of Israel. The rest of Genesis from chapter 12 on follows Abraham's family and the checkered history therein. It gets all sorts of shady in there, as it does with anyone in the Bible, all the while showing us how God is still with his new people, despite all their failures. By the end of Genesis, we're following a guy named Joseph, and how his brothers sell him into slavery, into Egypt, but how he rises to amazing prominence and influence in Egypt, second in command to Pharaoh himself, because of his great character and because the favor of God was on him. Genesis ends with Joseph's large family flourishing and growing. Hundreds of years then pass, and then we come to these verses before us here today. I'll take a little bit back, starting in verse 8. This is what Exodus 1 says. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. Joseph and his character and his good name with Pharaoh were forgotten in Egypt and forgotten by the new Pharaoh. And now his family, now called Israel, or the Hebrews at this point, has become an ethnic problem for the nation of Egypt. Notice how they view them. These people are different than us. Therefore, they are a problem for us that we have to deal with. Their assumptions are that these new Hebrews will potentially rise up against them and become enemies and join their enemies and fight them. And then at some point they will leave them. What's the implication there? The implication is that if they leave, they will destroy the Egyptian economy because the Egyptian economy has now become dependent on their labor. They will destroy our economy. They will destroy our way of life. So the Egyptian state decides to do something about it. They don't decide on a program of assimilation or a program of some sort of coexistence with their growing population of Hebrews, but they pursue a different path, a path of enslavement. This is not the first time in history that a nation has responded to a different ethnic group than themselves, who they see as different, who they see as the other, and end up seeing them as a threat to their national identity and their security, to their way of life, and to their economy. And this is not the first time in history that that nation decided to act wickedly in response, choosing to oppress people instead of some program of assimilation. But enslavement is just step one. God continues to bless his people even in the midst of their enslavement and new oppression, and the Egyptians then ratchet up to the next level their oppression and their wickedness. Verse 16 shows us this. Harsh oppression and enslavement are not working to suppress these people. The Hebrews are still a threat to the Egyptian state, they declare. They're still affecting our way of life. They are still not us. And we will stop being us if we don't change something about what is going on. Nationalism is wonderful when it is patriotic and it celebrates the blessings that you have as a people in a particular land. Nationalism is demonic when it leads to horrific things like what we're going to see next. On to step 2. Forced population control via infanticide. Pharaoh devises a plan and enlists the Hebrew midwives in his plan, the very first people to see all Hebrew children born at that time, the very first people that would care for any Israelite children who were born. Likely, Pharaoh, when he made this command to the Hebrew midwives, probably promised some form of reward, some form of financial compensation if they follow through with this, as well as on the back end an understanding if you don't do this, you will be killed. The command, kill all the boys that are born. Take the kids out, check out the sex of the child, and every boy is to be killed. Sex genocide is the prescription that Pharaoh commands them to do. But not every Hebrew male that exists, right? It's not go out and find every male Jew, and exterminate them wherever you find them in society. It's exterminate the males who aren't strong enough or old enough to defend themselves. Notice the evil of Pharaoh's plan. Infants are the most innocent humans possible in terms of a culpability scale. They're not just the most innocent, they're the most vulnerable, right? Because they are the most weak. Given proper time, proper nourishment, proper care, these male infants would grow into men who would then be capable of defending themselves against someone like the midwives or anyone else trying to take their lives. But the immense wickedness of Pharaoh's plan is that he goes after them when they are incapable of defending themselves. He goes after their lives when they are fully dependent on others for nourishment and care. This state of vulnerability, of weakness, of desperation, of full dependence on others for your life is what the Bible holistically will go on to call the poor. And God hates the oppression of the poor. Why? Because God does not look on your size or your age or your strength or your sex or your stage of development or if you're dependent on other humans for your livelihood, whether you're dependent on others for nourishment and care. He doesn't look at any of those things to determine whether or not you're worthy of dignity, worthy of honor, and worthy of protection. What does he look to? That you're made in his image, what theologians call the imago Dei, the image of God, all the way going back to the first chapter of the Bible, Genesis 1. Every human being, from womb to tomb, is made in the image of God. No matter your stage of development, no matter your age, no matter your strength, no matter your ability or disability, no matter your dependence on other human beings for your very life, all people are made in the image of God, worthy of protection, worthy of value, worthy of dignity, and worthy of love. And since in this first chapter we have the added dimension of ethnicity, we have the added dimension of nationalism and nationalistic identities, we could add that you are still made in the image of God, no matter your ethnic background, no matter your national citizenship or lack thereof, no matter your refugee status in another country. God looks to the imago Dei, the image of God in every human being created, and says, you are worthy of dignity, of honor, and of protection, especially those who are more vulnerable and without the ability to help themselves, as so often refugees and those fleeing from oppression are. The way of Pharaoh is the one that sees an opportunity for power over the powerless. The way of Pharaoh is one that takes the lives of the most vulnerable in their defenselessness and in their vulnerability. The way of Pharaoh is seeking to exterminate the other, the one who is different than me. The way of Pharaoh is to discriminate based on sex and gender and nationality and ethnicity, and to oppress those who do not hold your sex, your nationality, or your ethnicity. The way of Pharaoh is injustice that will be hidden and unseen by the main population because it's done in hidden rooms, away from cameras, and away from the rest of society. The way of Pharaoh is evil. What will the midwives do? In verse 15, we're given not just categories of people, but we're given two names, specific names, Shiphrah and Puah. One of the unique things about this is sometimes theologians say, well, are they just kind of representative of other people? Or are these just kind of representative names? And the names are so unique and so not known to other places in the ancient world that most commentators agree this have to be two specific individual women themselves. Likely these two women were elders over other Hebrew midwives, kind of like the leaders of midwives. They were in charge of others. So Pharaoh has just commanded them with likely potential of, on one hand, great financial reward if you follow through, and on the other hand, the threat of death if they defy the state and stand up to Pharaoh. He's just commanded them, kill every male Hebrew that is born. So what in the world are they going to do in this helpless situation? Let me ask, what will guide their decision? Every one of us has some sort of moral compass, right? If you're a follower of Jesus, how does you following Jesus factor in to that moral compass? What is your foundational value or values which you will hold that will help you make specific ethical decisions when they come up to you? The question for us, if you're a follower of Jesus, is what is my ultimate and most foundational ethical standing if I put my trust in Jesus? Shiphrah and Puah here, even though they're thousands of years before Jesus would come, are about to teach us what that looks like. Will they opt for self-enrichment, taking Pharaoh's money and saying, look, we weren't going to be able to stop Pharaoh anyway. If we do this, he's just going to do some other plan. Why don't we just take the money? I've got a lot of debt. I've got a lot of school debt need to pay off. My bills are getting really high. I could really use this. My family could use this money. Will they opt for self-preservation, fearing Pharaoh and the state taking their lives, taking their families' lives? Or maybe not even their lives, but just sticking them in prison for a long time. Likely saying, look, he's going to kill us if we don't do this. Surely we won't be responsible if he's going to take our own lives if we follow through with this. What will Shiphrah and Puah do? Look what the author of Exodus, most likely Moses himself, tells us. Verse 17. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. Shiphrah and Puah decided, or perhaps had decided in their hearts long ago, that they would fear God and not Pharaoh. They would fear God and not their own self-preservation. They would fear God and not their own self-enrichment. They would fear God and respect the imago Dei, the image of God, in all others. What is to be the guiding moral compass for followers of Jesus? Or if you're in here and you're exploring who Jesus is, you may ask, what do Christians look to as their guiding moral compass? The Old Testament, the Jewish scriptures would answer, fearing God. It means having him and his kingdom and his values as first in your own priorities. Not the state's priorities, not your political party's priorities, not your ethnic group's priorities, not even your own family's priorities, but God's first and foremost. Jesus summed up fearing God in another way, he kind of expanded upon this. He said like this, the two greatest commandments are to love God and love people. This is the whole of our foundational ethic as followers of Jesus. They essentially mean the same thing as fearing God. This is what Jesus' kingdom is made up of, where justice and righteousness exist in full. We are to love God above all and love people. We're to fear God above all. Look what results. Pharaoh eventually finds out. We get the impression from the text that it probably took a while for him to find out. Why? Well, it's likely that ancient children back in that day, when they were young, wore more or less the same clothing and had more or less the same length of hair. So it took a while until you could figure out, hey, wait a second, there's still just as many Hebrew boys as there are Hebrew girls. So what is Pharaoh going to do? He is enraged. He is angry. We are led, starting in verse 18, to think this is probably going to be the end of Shiphrah and Puah. But Pharaoh first has a question. Why have you done this? Why didn't you follow through? I'm Pharaoh. I am in charge over all of this. Why have you not done what I told you to do? Their answer is actually quite comical, right? Hey, look, these Hebrew women, they have their kids super quickly before we get there, before the midwives show up. They just pop them out all of a sudden and they're gone and we can't do anything about it. It's actually really kind of funny on the surface. Some of the commentators I looked at theorized they might not be technically lying. There could be some actual physical differences between the way that the Hebrew women gave birth and the way the Egyptian women did because of practices and whatever else might be there. Or perhaps even more likely, Shiphrah and Puah gathered everyone together in the community and said, look, here's the plan. We're going to delay the midwives as long as possible anytime we know someone's about to be born. We're just going to kind of hang back, hang out with the family, watch some TV shows before we show up at the house and make sure you get the baby out, because if the baby comes out before we get there, then she'll be protected. We don't know. The text doesn't expand upon it. But if you think Shiphrah and Puah are telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth, we're going way beyond what the text says here, of course. So what does that mean? Sometimes deception before power is actually righteous. That has to be one of the takeaways we have from this. Shiphrah and Puah are only commended here, not rebuked for like, hey, Shiphrah and Puah were great, but they did this whole lying thing, and lying's bad, and God commands not to. They are only commended here. Would I recommend this practice in your life? Just kind of deceiving things and not telling the truth everywhere and kind of doing what? No. It is clear from the rest of the scriptures, the people of God are called to tell the truth, not lie, not spin, so on and so forth. Likely, the stakes that Shiphrah and Puah are in here, none of us are probably ever going to come up to a situation like that, where the lives of others are up against a specific decision of whether or not we deceive or tell the truth. But we have to take away here. Sometimes the injustice is so great in the state that you are in that disobedience to the state, to the authorities, to the government, and deception for the protection of the innocent is more righteous than to tell the truth before an unjust state. We could probably pull out many examples of that over time. Places like Nazi Germany would probably be a great one we could pull out. Schindler's List would obviously be a great theatrical representation of that. This is at least the case here. Followers of Jesus do not seek, above all, to obey the state. For Americans, the United States. We seek to obey God above all. And if you're a Christian in another country, you seek to obey God above whatever country you're in. The state and God are not the same. What's the result? God blesses Shiphrah and Puah. They were even able to have their own families. The implication actually is that perhaps they were midwives because they couldn't have children before this. They went into the practice because they had enough time, because they were barren for some reason. And so this is an implication that they were blessed from God and able to actually have their own families too as a result. And the people of God in Egypt continue to grow. More importantly, thousands of lives of babies were saved by the actions of these two amazing, courageous women. Pharaoh then, of course, ramps up the genocide even more. He goes to the next step since he can't do anything with the midwives. And many of us know the story after this, how because of that practice, Moses was put in a basket and was miraculously, providentially adopted by Pharaoh's family himself and raised up eventually. That continues on the rest of the story of Exodus. But Moses, again, likely the author of Exodus here, decided to put down this important story in the very beginning of the book of Exodus. Not just that, he put down their names. This isn't such a big deal for us. We're used to, having nicknames. Names for Americans usually don't carry the same weight as they do, especially in a lot of ancient cultures and a lot of Eastern cultures. Tend not to be an honor-shame culture where dishonoring your family name means everything in certain cultures. It was much more like that in ancient Israel culture. So Moses putting down their names here is a huge deal. Only Moses and Joseph and their families are actually named in the first chapters of Exodus. Pharaoh doesn't get named. We have no idea which Pharaoh this is. We have some ideas from history, but Pharaoh's not named. His officials are never named. The Israelite elders themselves, the chief leaders of the Hebrews, are not named. But Shiphrah and Puah are named. They are commended for us forever in the scriptures to be amazing examples of what it looks like to fear God above the state or above any other tribal allegiance you might have. Thousands of years later, in the book of Matthew is recorded, another state leader named Herod would take the lives of poor and innocent infants in order to prop up his own reign and power. Herod sought to kill the infant Jesus soon after his birth, but failing to, ended up unjustly taking the lives of many infants who had no opportunity to defend themselves. But God protected his son, Jesus, taking him and his earthly parents down to, ironically, Egypt. As God rose up Moses to rescue and save his people from oppression, so God protected Jesus and rose him up so he could rescue and save his people, you and me. He did this not by standing up to power and oppression, but by defeating it on the cross through his death and through his resurrection. He, Jesus, feared God above all and perfectly. And now he becomes the ultimate foundation for our own moral choices. Jesus, his sacrifice, his refusing to take on power, his loving in spite of all the tribal allegiances that were before him, everyone who came to him, especially the poor and the oppressed, and his dying so that we could have life, his bringing people from every tribe, tongue, and nation into his family is to be our new moral compass and foundation. May Jesus, may his work on the cross, may his kingdom, which is now ours, enable us to live like Shiphrah and Puah did. Let's pray. God, I will confess, I could not have named these two women off the top of my head from this story today, but I'm thankful they are recorded in the scriptures here. I'm thanking you that Moses and others who wrote down this story took the time to tell us of their amazing courage, I'm sure they were sinners and had many mistakes at many other points in their lives. But we have a chance today to reflect on how they feared you above the state, above their own self-enrichment, above their own self-preservation. God, would you help us do the same? We have an even greater example, the perfect example. Jesus, who took on all suffering, who loved everyone that came before him, who breaks the chains of the oppressed, and who gave his life and conquered, not through taking up power, but by letting it go, and then showing his glory through rising from the dead. Lord, let that be our foundation for how we live. Most of us, you know, Lord, are never going to have situations like Shiphrah and Puah did, but we do have choices to make every day. We do have ethical decisions to make. We do have ways we can pray, and in this country, we have ways we can vote and make decisions. God, help us to do that wisely with your kingdom and your values as the priority. We pray this in Jesus' name.